Hey guys! Alright, so in this video, what I wanted to talk to you about is hip flexibility and hip mobility for if you're a rower or you're just lacking that hip motion. So for rowing specifically, it requires us to get, not quite like I am, but to get like your knee pretty close to your chest or as close as it's comfortable on that rowing machine or on the water. And in order to do that, you need to have hip motion. So we're basically crunching down here, getting our thigh as close to our trunk as possible while maintaining a knee bend and a specific position with our back. So if hip mobility is one of those things that's limiting you, that's what this video is going to cover. So I'm going to go over some hip flexibility and hip mobility things that you can work on. The funny thing is, hip flexibility is usually, or saying that we lack flexibility. Sometimes we don't know if that's coming from a mobility or a flexibility component. So you might be saying, what the heck does that mean? So mobility is more of like what the joint can do. How much can my joint actually physically move? For instance, when I move my wrist like this is how much mobility I have. And notice how I can push a little to get a little bit more of mobility. And I feel that in the joint. I don't feel any muscle tension or any stretching in that muscle. So it's not really a flexibility, it's a joint mobility thing. So our hip is similar. Our hip is a joint, our knee is a joint, our ankle is a joint. So when we lack mobility, it could be from the muscles or it could be from the joint. So different things or different reasons cause you to want to try different things. So first is trying to figure out, is yours a mobility issue where it's more like the joint doesn't want to go anymore? Or is it a flexibility thing? Kind of like when you bend over to touch your toes, is it that you feel a big stretch in your hamstring? Then that's probably a flexibility component. So I'm going to go over the mobility stuff right now. So for mobility part, that's the joint maybe not moving as nicely. I recommend a band like this. I'll put a link to this in the comments below so you can check it out if you want. So this is a resistance band. It's often used for like helping with pull-up assisting. This is actually a pretty hefty one. You can use ones that are slightly smaller as well. If you want to use it for different things like your ankle and your hip and get more bang for your buck, you can go a little bit less than this. But this one's got a significant amount of pounds pressure that really helps for the hip. But basically what we're going to start with is attach it to something. So for me, I have this pole here. Certain ones you might be able to attach, you can like wrap it around trees, you can wrap it around tables that won't move, things like that. You can kind of find what you have in your house. So for me, I've attached it here. And what you're gonna do is step into it. So this is me doing my right hip. And what I'm gonna do is bring this up as close to my hip joint as I possibly can. And then I'm going to scooch forward until I've got a good amount of resistance that I can kind of feel it pulling, like it wants to pull me back. But you want it to be a comfortable amount of resistance. Then what we're going to do is bring your knee up like this, and you can have, we're going to have our ankle underneath our knee, and then we're just going to go forward. So I'm going to lean forward and have some pressure on my hands. So the band wants to pull me that way. So what we're doing is a distraction that way, so posteriorly. And what's going to happen is you might feel it. If it's uncomfortable here, you can move it around, or you can place a towel between you and the band. Do what's comfortable for you. But once you're in this position, you can play with kind of moving your knee in and out. You can play with kind of sticking your hip back and forth, and just kind of play around with all these different motions. But for rowing, I want you to think about not really having your knee pop out to the side. Try and have that knee in front of you, and then more popping the hip, kind of like that. This is going to emulate a little bit more of that positioning that we need for rowing, a little bit more than, say, squatting or some other things that you might be doing. So that's one thing you can do. And you can do it on the other side as well. Then what we'll do is a sideways one. So it'll be a lateral, which means this band is pulling me outwards, pulling that way. So it's the same thing. Put it as high as you can comfortably get. Go out to where it's comfortable, but where you can get your balance. So that's a little bit too far for me. And then you're going to do the same thing. And notice the knee is in line with my body. It's not out here to the side. And you're just going to kind of hip in and out. Work on that distraction, really get it nice and comfortable. And then you're just kind of jutting that hip in and out, doing it for about 2 minutes, just playing around with different spots where you might feel tension. So that's the second one. The third one is going to be on our back. And what you're going to do is put this band, I'm going to do this leg, switch legs on me, over like this. And again, you're trying to get as close to that hip joint as you can. And then we're going to back up so there's some resistance. And then we're actually going to pull our hip up into our knee up into as much hip flexion or hip bend that we can get. Other leg, you can go straight, or you can go with a little bend if it bugs your back. Try not to really let your back super arch though, so you want to have it nice and controlled and kind of flat on the ground. Then what we're going to do is when I'm in this amount of flexion, I'm going to bring my leg up like this. If you get numbness or tingling in your leg, your calf, your foot, go ahead and back off a little bit to right before that spot. And then what we're going to do is just pull and hold here. And you can kind of oscillate, go back and forth like you were doing with the hip jutting out one. But we're just going to go to where it's comfortable. If you can go to where you don't feel numbness and tingling and you're just feeling a pull in the calf or here, go for it. But that's what you're trying to play with. And this is really about getting you into as much hip bend as we can get, which is that catch position when you're rowing. Okay, so those are some things that you can do for the mobility components. And then in another video, I will go over the flexibility parts. And I hope that helped. If you got questions, let me know. My name is Amanda Painter, and happy to help.